is our history. Buildings and people and memories and dreams. Who better to tell us than those who were there? There's so much to learn from the stories they'll share.
Living history. Living history.
Hello, and welcome to another Living History Show with Ted Goldsborough and our guest today, Mrs. Louise Salama and Dr. Elaine Reed. Both of them are Narbrook Park residents. We'll be talking about a section of Narberth called Narbrook Park. Welcome, ladies. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Nice to be here.
Could you tell us what Narbrook Park is and where it is? Either one of you.
It's a small community within the confines of Narberth. It's actually right across the street from the Narberth playground near the library, and many people don't realize it's there, but it's a small private community of 35 homes that were developed there around the turn of the century.
Mrs. Salama?
It's a lovely little community, really, with a great open space in the middle that with a brook running through it, and the children who have lived in the park have just loved being there.
Some of those ideas that you mentioned, like the open space with a stream, who owns that open space?
The residents of the park do. We own it in common.
Okay. So although your houses are around the perimeter, you all own the common area.
Right.
And that stream, I believe, originates up on Montgomery Avenue, sort of behind the Viva restaurant. And in all my lifetime of 74 years, I've never seen that stream dry up. So even in a drought, there's always water running in that stream, which is really remarkable.
I think that's true.
Just a spring.
It's pretty much groundwater. There is some runoff from local streets during rain, but it's largely groundwater. It percolates from the ground at basically 50 degrees year-round. It also doesn't freeze over.
That's right. Yeah, I never saw that freeze. Yeah.
True.
As one is on Windsor Avenue, how do you know that you're getting to Narbrook Park? What do you see?
There's an entrance with stone walls on either side. There's a sign that identifies it.
Okay.
Right. Sign that says
looks
Narbook
like
Park. And
Now, when I was a kid, I don't believe there was a sign, so maybe this
No,
is
there
20 or
wasn't.
30 years old.
yes.
And the first house, well, let me stop for a second, excuse me. In today's maps, like a 1990s map of Lower Township, it shows Narbrook Park off of Windsor Avenue. I
Right.
hope I'm on the right end here. Is this a Windsor Avenue?
It is. You do
Okay,
good.
okay. And it shows the layout, kind of a semicircle there, and there are little horseshoes or little circles that come off of that. And there's some, I don't see it on this map, but anyway, this gives us an idea of where Narbrook Park is. It's between Conway Avenue and Wynwood Avenue and
Price.
Windsor Avenue and Price
Yes.
Avenue. So it's sitting in
Got it.
between those. When one goes back and looks at an 1851 map,
It's a very different place then.
Narberth was called Libertyville, and that development was up where the stream begins. It was up behind the Viva restaurant. And the railroad tracks are here, down by the playground. And there you can see a fork of streams. And one of those streams begins over at Gibson's, what do we call it, Miriam Estate, the Thomas Wynn
Thomas
Apartments.
Wynn, right.
And the other begins up, and it's called the East Branch of the Indian Creek, begins up at Libertyville. And where those two join is in Narbrook Park. So this map is a little off a little bit, and I think really that joining should be up a little bit further here. Any comments about this map?
Well, you can see, if you remember the previous map, that there really was not much development at that end of Narberth a long time ago, but the train tracks went through, and that was actually part of the impetus for developing that otherwise very boggy piece of ground, because as the train tracks went by, you may recall at the turn of the century there was what was called the Progressive Era. It was sort of a post-Victorian, let's try more of a community thing, and the Burgess, which was what the mayor was called at the time, was very pro-Progressive Era, as was the mayor of Philadelphia, and they shared a goal of trying to have the community build something that would establish Narberth as a progressive community within sight of a very highly used main line of the Pennsylvania Railroad. And that was part of the planning. That beautiful entryway that's made of Wissahickon schist stone was to give a vista to the people then who could see from their train tracks, which now is over, has many trees. You can't see that well.
Yeah. Also, I wanted to mention that the park land was owned by a man named Owen Jones, and he owned up behind Arnold Field and the Wynwood train station, and he had saved, or he owned, a little piece of the stream, and we are conjecturing 200 years later why he did that.
But we have a theory, don't we?
Yes, we have a theory. What is that theory?
He owned cattle, and
he had
they needed
cattle.
water.
Yes, and so you had a stream, and it wasn't in deep banks, so the cows could just go down there and wallow around in the mud and get something to drink.
Right, they did.
Yeah.
Yes. And you can see there are several other owners, and at the time when the park was going to be developed, that property had to be negotiated with a number of owners.
Yes,
in
yes.
a relatively short time.
Yes, I think there's some, in fact, they even had a name of a street cutting through what became Narbrook Park, which never did, fortunately. This map is from 1913, and it showed the Tolans were related. They were heirs of the Jones, Owen Jones.
Okay.
So Tolan owns Narbrook Park at this time in 1913, but as you say, there were some parts that had to be bought from other people. And in fact, John B. Williams is off of Wynwood Road, and he became one of the people who bought a lot in Narbrook Park. I guess he was trying to protect his property. Some of the names of the people early on, well, let me see if I want to go. Yeah, I guess I'll go that way, or if you have anything to say. But what happened? How did Tolan give up ownership of the park? What happened?
Do you want to talk about the Narberth Civic Association?
Yes, that's
formed?
fine. That's fine. Thank you.
That was formed in order to decide what to do with that land.
So it was several civically minded people mostly from Narberth, I think at least two from Wynwood, or at least one
Yes,
from Wynwood.
yes.
Who, with of course the mayor, decided that this would be a good thing to do without public funds. And the whole venture was supposed to be supported by the sale of the plots. And so each lot was designed, and then a lottery occurred. People put their names in a hat and drew their names, and in the sequence they drew their names, they got lots for amounts varying from $1,100 to $1,600.
That's correct.
$1,100
That
to
is correct.
$1,600.
Yeah. Now, who laid out? Who designed this? What was that landscaper's name?
That was
Pope.
Robert Anderson Pope.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And he had been. Yeah, go ahead.
He had been a student of
Olmsted.
Olmsted, Frederick
yeah,
Olmsted.
right.
Right.
And this was a period of time when garden
cities.
garden cities were being talked about,
Yes.
being thought about, talked about.
And our historian Victoria Donahoe said that movement started in England and then came over to the States.
Right.
So it was a progressive period in getting residents to do things to improve their community. So,
and also sort of a reaction against overcrowding and
yeah,
tenement
just the
type
city,
of building.
right.
So they wanted to create a human space, a space where people could have a community and not just be a house next to a house on a street that people drove by.
In that Narberth civic group were prominent people in Narberth, like William T. Harris was a developer.
Right.
Mr. Artman had an apartment complex
That's right.
next to Narbook Park. Of course, I should have this all out, but I don't. And Mary Gibson owned Gibson's Woods, where Artman and where the Thomas Wynne apartments are today. Smedley and Hawes were developers. Alexander Shand was a developer. So these were local people who were able to put up a few $1,000s to put their names into a hat, and then there was a drawing.
Yes.
And they drew lots.
They drew lots.
Literally
Right.
drew lots.
Yes.
Right.
And there were some that weren't chosen.
Correct.
Right.
Several house numbers in Narbook Park, and Mr. Alexander Shand was a construction man, and he was authorized, I guess, by the Civic Association to do some grading.
Right. That's
Okay,
right.
could you tell about that?
Well, the original architect, landscape architect, Pope.
We're up against a break here, but we'll be right back. This is Ted Goldsboro with Living History, and we're talking to Mrs. Salama and Dr. Reed.